Well, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to today's Infopedia web conference. You've joined us for configuring call quality dashboard to monitor your Skype for Business online environment. We're finishing a few last minute preparations for our session. We'll be getting started in just a few minutes, so go ahead and sit back, relax, and we'll be back with you shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome again to today's Infopedia web conference. You've joined us for configuring call quality dashboard to monitor your Skype for Business online environment. We are broadcasting this web conference via Skype meeting broadcast, and the audio can be heard through your PC speakers. Today's web conference is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. If you do not consent to being part of a recorded session, we ask that you please disconnect your browser at this time. Attendees may access the web conference recording via a link that will be delivered within 72 hours post-conference. You may ask a question at any time using the Q&A panel located either to the right of your screen or by scrolling down to just below the video pane. Our presenters will be responding to your questions throughout the presentation and again at the end of the presentation during a formal Q&A. And last but not least, if you experience any technical difficulties during today's web conference, first try refreshing your web browser by pressing the F5 key. If that doesn't work for you, you'll want to go ahead and click on the support link at the top right corner of your browser. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get started with our section. Presenting for us today from Microsoft, we have Senior Customer Engineering Architect, Dave Jennings. Dave, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Janice, and hello. Thank you for attending today's Skype Academy session based upon the Skype Operations Framework. Within today's session, we'll be focused on walking through what are the capabilities provided within the call quality dashboard, and then as part of that, we'll also walk through what are the steps required for enablement, and then lastly, what are the steps that we would like to walk through in ensuring that the services have been properly configured. As a quick introduction about me, my name is Dave Jennings, and with being located out of Indianapolis, Indiana, I'm an architect on the Customer Experience and Deployment team, and as an active participant in the continued deployment of Skype Operations Framework, I'm also currently applying SOF to multiple active Skype for Business deployments. If you've attended some of the SOF session trainings so far, I would expect that you would have some familiarity of what Skype Operations Framework, or SOF, and its goals are supporting within your Skype for Business online deployment. However, if you're new to SOF, I'd highly recommend that you view Lester's excellent session on the overview of SOF, which can be accessed at skypeoperationsframework.com/academy. At the end of the day, through SOF, we're providing guidance on how best to plan, deliver, operate, and support your Skype for Business online environment. To learn more, please visit www.skypeoperationsframework.com. In consideration, it's also important to note that SOF will continue to be getting updated over time. As part of that, your feedback is critical to provide information for how SOF should be updated going forward. We want to hear from you based upon the tools and assets utilized, what works well, what doesn't. If you feel that there's anything additional that's missing, or if you have any other additional feedback that should be considered that you'd like to provide to our team, please be sure to visit skypeoperationsframework.com/feedback. One thing to note, as mentioned previously, SOF is a living framework. So as such, this is version 1 of the training. As we continue to operate, it's possible that some of the material discussed will most undoubtedly change. So for those that you look to view this training after the recording has been completed in the future, you may find that some details are not quite identical as we'll walk through today. When we do have significant updates available in the future, we will look to update the training as needed, but just keep that in context in mind. Now on today's session for configuring call quality dashboard to monitor your Skype for Business online environment. To begin with, in the outcome of this session, the key objective is to first understand what are the capabilities provided within the call quality dashboard, or CQD, and part of that, understanding why CQD is important, supporting your deployment, to also identify what are the steps required for successful enablement, and then lastly, what are some of the steps to consider and to be validated to ensure that CQD has been properly configured and enabled, supporting your deployment. The agenda we'll walk through today is to provide an introduction of what Call Quality Dashboard is. And again, the scope here is focused on Skype for Business Online. To understand what are some of the steps that need to be required to ensure a successful enablement. Then as part of that, we'll actually walk through an example in the case of Contoso with some steps that may need to be referenced with how to properly define and configure CQD to best support your deployment. And then lastly, we'll walk through what are the confirmation steps necessary to ensure that CQD or Call Quality Dashboard has been properly deployed. About this activity, as part of the Skype operations framework, this enablement of Call Quality Dashboard is a task that's usually put in place as we focus on the deliver phase with the subtask of deploy. To begin with, we'll walk through an introduction of what Call Quality Dashboard is and as it applies to the Skype for Business online environment. As a point of reference, one of the questions quite often asked is, what is Call Quality Dashboard and why is it important for my environment? And to begin, I think it's important to understand is that Call Quality Dashboard is a consolidated reporting structure that allows you to understand and quickly assess the overall health of your Skype for Business online environment, but also provides the ability to customize and provide detailed reports to further evaluate how the service is being used, and part of that also to allow additional information if needed to triage problem issues as reported. If you may not be aware, within the Skype for Business online service and within the endpoints and clients themselves, at the completion of each type of call, whether that's a voice, audio, or conference scenario, within the client, there's actually the call quality methodology that is utilized where a set of reports information will be automatically uploaded to the service at the completion of the call, with focus on key quality metric details that we have shown within this slide below. Some of the metrics that we typically look to cover are to understand what were the endpoints that were involved within that session, what are the IP subnet segments that they were connecting from. So as we'll talk a little bit later in the building subnet definition that you import into CQD online, that's where it becomes important in knowing where the subnets within your organization reside. And then also as part of that to also know where subnets within your organization may not exist. So that's one of the tasks that we'll also talk about that should be maintained as the service expands over time. Additional details that will normally be collected as part of that quality metric report are things about what are the type of client versions that were used. Was the connection via a direct connected Ethernet? Was it via wireless? Were they connected via VPN? And additional details around the quality of the call itself. So for example, were there a percentage of packet loss that was introduced or identified? Were there issues with jitter that affected the quality of the call? All of this to summarize gets uploaded into the service itself, from which the CQD capability can better trend and report upon. And then the last thing to mention of why CQD is important is it also provides a great capability to see how the service is used, but also to identify other areas that may require further investigation. So to begin, we'll kind of walk through what are the steps required for proper call quality dashboard or CQD enablement. One of the things to consider is that there's two roles that will have to be utilized in order to enable this capability within your tenant. One of which can be done by default if you happen to have the role as global administrator. This allows you to easily activate the service within the Skype for Business online service. Or if in the case you require to delegate this role to another administrator or operations team within your organization instead, the role assigned for that would be as shown, which is the Skype for Business Administrator role. In order to look to the next steps for proper permissioning to complete the enablement, you would actually log into the administrative portal supporting your tenant and then actually identify the user for whose roles membership you need to modify. To do that, you actually start by navigating to the active users view, again from within the Office 365 administrative portal. And then once you've identified the users you want to assign this role, you'll actually choose to modify that role with the Skype for Business Administrator setting. So as you can see here, we have the user where we're actually wanting to delegate the capability to not only enable call quality dashboard, but also to be able to view and manage the reports within. So to complete that permission request, we're modifying the role tab as selected, choosing edit to complete the role assignment, and then ensuring that we have the Skype for Business Administration role applied. Once the permissioning requirements have been completed, then the next steps will be actually to activate the call quality dashboard services themselves. One thing to note is that this is a one-time activation. So it's not a process that will have to be repeated over time. Usually, again, as mentioned previously as part of the Skype operations framework, it's one of the tasks that we want to make sure that we go through and enable as part of the planning and deliver phase. So if we look at option one, we have the ability where we can actually complete the activation, again, from within the administrative portal supporting Office 365, where on the left, if we navigate to the Administrative Center supporting Skype for Business. Once that admin portal has been made available, we'll then actually navigate, as you see on the left, under the Tools tab, and then actually on the right, click the link to enable Skype for Business Call Quality Dashboard. The second option is that we also have the ability to where we can actually log into the Call Quality Dashboard Management URL directly. And again, assuming with having an account that's either been delegated the Skype for Business Administration role, or if in the case that it's the Tenant Global Administrator, to do so, it's as simple as entering the URL below, which is secure https cqd.link.com. Once that has been brought up within the browser, you'll be prompted to sign in into Skype Quality Dashboard as shown within the diagram below. After signing in, the CQD enablement process will automatically activate for your account and for your tenant. As you see within the diagram shown, you'll see that there's 3 steps that the process will actually go through. The key to understand here is that it's not an immediate activation that will happen upon signing in, but it could take anywhere from 2 to 4 hours for the complete activation process to complete. Once the services have been activated, you actually have the option as the next step, which is defining the building information, which contains subnet details specific to your organization across all your defined sites. One of the options you have to consider is that you can define and enable this information after waiting and ensuring that the CQD services are enabled, or to begin viewing data immediately once that provisioning process has been complete. You can actually go ahead and navigate to the tenant data upload tab as shown below to define that information so that once the enablement process is complete, you can begin reporting right away. To access the tenant data upload pane, it's important to note that it has to be made available by navigating to the URL shown, which is https://cqd.link.com/spd. And the note on the SPD reference is to understand that that is the summary reports pane. Once clicking the tab for building information upload, you'll actually see that we have a couple of options that are available to us. Currently today, the only data type possible is building, as mentioned previously. And then what we'll do as the next step is to browse to a comma delimited file, which is in an excel.tsv format that will actually have the IP subnet information details supporting your organization and sites. Some additional information to consider when populating this building information file format is that essentially there are a minimum of 14 columns that are required and that there's a difference of data type required for each column. So as we have shown in the case of network, that's actually a string value that can be utilized, whereas when we talk about network range, which is actually the subnet mask for that network, that is a number expected value instead. And then as we look towards the bottom of whether the subnet is inside the corporation or if express route is used, it's actually required to be a Boolean value for those specific fields. In the case of 1, that is true, or 0, that is false. And to also touch on some of the different columns available, the network is actually the subnet that we would normally define specifying that site. The network name is actually a value that you could use that could be meaningful to the organization. So in one of the examples we'll walk through, we've seen in some cases where it may make sense to have this tied back to a specific campus. You can also get granular to expand this further to make reference to a building within the campus. You can also leverage that as part of the building name column shown. And then you can also provide additional detail, maybe if there's a VLAN identifier that you want to include, or if that network is a wireless segment, or even to the point of VPN. But the key takeaway there is to have context within that network name so that it's meaningful and actionable. The column below around network range I mentioned is really just the number in a CIDR format, which is the subnet mask supporting the network within that reference. And then following on in terms of building name and ownership, these are really, again, string values that are meaningful within your organization. So this could be HQ as an example for the building name. Capability or ownership type could be the name of the company, followed by building type or building office type that may even be a location, again, a campus, or maybe even the type of folks that work within that local site. And then towards the bottom are additional details that, again, support that row within the TSV file. So obviously the city where that subnet resides, the zip code supporting that site, and then country where those sites are located, and then state or region that would need to be considered. So region could be the case where we think about North America, EMEA, APAC, and so on. And then lastly, as mentioned, are the options where we denote that this subnet is inside the corporate. So typically within Call Quality Dashboard, that's normally where we want to initiate our focus to quickly gain deep insights and detail in knowing how our internal environment is operating. And then the other thing too is if it's in the case where ExpressRoute has been deployed, so being able to report on those details as well. Additional points to consider as we look to define the building information file format is that there are some size limits where it needs to be 50 megabits or less. A couple other points to consider is that in populating this file, when you save it within either your text editor of choice or Excel, as an example, we need to make sure that the table header is not included as part of the file output. And then as mentioned earlier, based on specific data types required that we walked through previously, we need to make sure that we adhere to the right expected values accordingly. The last couple points to note is that if you do have empty columns that you choose not to use, those must be separated by a tab. And then lastly, for additional details and some examples that you can reference, you can refer to the URL below, which is http://aka.ms config CQD online. Lastly, so once we have our building information file that has been defined and properly populated, the last step then is to actually choose Browse to navigate to that file and then to complete the upload process where we'll actually provide and choose the start date information correlating. And so the reason for the start date is really just a verification date from all the information we've provided to make sure that it's accurate and up to date. So when we report within CQD, we can see where those details were initially populated. So we walk through at a high level, what is CQD, what are some of the requirements in terms of enablement, and then kind of what are the steps you would go through to complete that process. So the next thing we'll walk through is kind of a further detailed building upload example in the case of Contoso. So as mentioned, there may be some additional granularity that you may want to put in place within your environment. And typically we see as a best practice, it helps having segmentation and knowing what specific campuses may exist, what buildings we may need to further identify within those campuses, and then also specific details, maybe either with floor or VLANs within those buildings, and also then further segmentation if this is a segment that's identified via wireless, or alternatively if this is a segment that's supported through VPN instead. And the reason that it's important to do this proper planning and definition up front is this will pay dividends later as you look to do your reporting and to do your trending to quickly assess and identify what are the good spots and less than optimized spots within your organizational environment. So if we talk through the example in the case of Contoso, we have seen shown the first example, which is really walking through the campus reference. We, as mentioned, first start off with the subnet that is on the left. We have the example on the name of the campus. Then the next field to the right, we actually have the subnet mask, which again, as I mentioned, is a number format expected. In this example, I continued with maintaining that this is the South Campus that we would look at from a building point of view, and then just added some additional detail in terms of ownership and what are the type of users within this building. So I use Contoso in this example, then HQ to note that this is a headquarters. And then lastly, as you see to the right, followed up with what is the city this campus is located, what is the supporting zip code, and then the the country where this campus resides, the state, and then lastly followed up with the region. And in this case, I've got 1 to denote that this is an internal segment, and lastly 0 that this express route has not been deployed. If we continue on to the second example, we basically follow similar suit. The difference here is that after the subnet, we actually have identified the building number within the campus. So again, a lot of the same details are populated, but what this allows us to do is start to get a little bit granular, a little bit more detailed in knowing where these IP subnets reside. If we go to the third line, we go again 1 step further. So we talked about identifying what is the campus. In this example that follows, what is the building within the campus. And so as the third example, we're now looking at what is the floor or location within that building. So again, in this case, we have that identified as appropriately, and then also within the same campus, within the same region, within the same city and site. And then lastly, identifying that that floor or location is also internal to the corporate network. And then the last 2 examples, again, follow suit, but really the difference here is identifying the difference in subnet and identifying that this is a wireless segment. We could also include additional details like SSID if there were multiple wireless access points within the campus. And then the last example as well is from a VPN point of view, again, just indicating and knowing that where these users are connecting from a reporting roll-up aspect. So the last step that we'll talk about then, so having gone through putting in place the proper permissions employment to enable call quality dashboard services, walking through the configuration details for proper activation, and populating the building file details so that we get the reporting results expected. The last step that we'll go through as part of our activation is the validation and ensuring that the services are actually active and we're able to begin reporting. Again, as mentioned, one of the first ways we can do this is by navigating back to the call quality dashboard default management pane. And the way we would get to that would be via https://cqd.link.com/SPD. So again, the SPD reference is referring to the summary reports pane. That's also important to note is that if there's a second pane available called detailed reports, and if you happen to be from that particular view, you won't have the option to do the tenant data upload or the tenant health verification, which is the example we have shown below. So in validating that CQD services have been properly enabled and we're ready to begin viewing and monitoring reports, we'll actually click on the tenant health as is indicated by clicking on the service icon in the upper right corner. Once that has been refreshed, then as a point of validation to know that call quality dashboard services have been populated and we're ready for reporting, is you'll actually see that the dashboard is showing the latest data. So that's one of the indication points that we want to verify. And then we also, the other important thing to note is that the date from which that data is being shown. So as mentioned previously, call quality dashboard services currently isn't a real-time service in terms of as you think about the reports and the different data points that you're viewing. Usually there's about a day or so lag with the data that's being analyzed. So as you're going through to confirm enablement and to understand what date range and time frame you're working from a data report point of view, this is a good verification for that. In summary, we talked about what are the different capabilities of call quality dashboard that are default within Office 365. We also talked about why CQD is a critical component to consider as part of your deployment. We also talked about what are the prerequisites we need to consider, really mainly around the permissions required, either if I do this enablement as a global administrator or delegate that role to a specific team within my organization. We also talked through, as part of that enablement, the proper definition of defining the building IP subnet format, what are the criteria to consider, and how to actually have that meaningful so that you can leverage the best capabilities within CQD. And then lastly, we talked about the steps required for ensuring that CQD services have been successfully configured and enabled. For additional information to learn more, you can reference the URL below, which is based at skypeoperationsframework.com/offers, where we actually have a detailed document that will walk you through the steps we walk through within this session step by step. Again, based on the Skype operations framework, we walk through today enabling CQD quality dashboard services, which is part of the deliver phase, focused within the deploy activity. As we mentioned earlier, SOF is always going to be in a process of continuing to be getting updated. So we want to hear from you. Your feedback is valuable, and we really want to know how the tools and assets available are working for you within your organization, within your deployments. And for additional sessions related to SOF, I would point you back to check out skypeoperationsframework.com/academy. And Janice, thank you, and back to you.
All right, thank you, Dave. All right, audience, we're going to be going into the formal Q&A session in just a few moments. Just as a reminder, if you would like to ask a question, you may do so by typing into the white text box located on the right-hand side of your viewing window, or by scrolling down to just below the video pane. Before we do that, though, if you've not already found it, I'd like to bring your attention to a link on the upper right-hand side of the viewing window that says, "Please take a short survey." That's a link to a short survey for this web conference, and we ask that you please take a moment before logging out to access it. We hope that you found today's information helpful, and if you enjoyed today's web conference or have feedback on how we can provide you with a better event, this is your chance to let us know. The survey scores are on a scale from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest score possible. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to Dave to answer any Q&A and wrap up with some final thoughts. Dave?
Great, thank you. Well, one of the first questions that's been asked is, so if we think about the federated scenario where we're having a call or communication with a federated partner, will that information be visible within my CQD instance, and how does that work? And the short answer is no. The way that would actually work in that case is that from a federated point of view, that information will be maintained within the federation partner's instance. So for example, they have their own CQD capability, whereas within your tenant supporting Skype for Business Online, really the details we will have will be just for the communications from your view instead. Great question. Okay, the last thing that I would just iterate is that, as you can see, as you look as part of your deliver and planning exercise for Skype for Business Online services within your environment, I hope that the key takeaway here is that CQD enablement is a critical component supporting your deployment, and that there's a lot of capability that we gather by default that can really help you monitor, assess, and maintain with how this service is being best utilized, and as you look to expand the service going forward. I hope you've enjoyed today's session, and I'll be here for another few minutes for any additional questions that remain.
All right, thanks, Dave. All right, audience, that is going to conclude today's web conference. Attendees may access the web conference recording by a link that will be delivered within 72 hours post-conference. I'd like to extend a big thank you to our presenter, Dave Jennings, and thank you, audience, for logging in and joining us today. You may now disconnect from the broadcast.